Hey guys, it's Alex here from Homey. And you could have guessed it, but today we're taking a look at motion sensors. And I've got 6 different motion sensors arrayed in front of me here. And they come in different forms, sizes, shapes, prices. They have different advantages, disadvantages, and they work on different network protocols. So you can sometimes get a little overwhelmed when selecting which motion sensor is best for your smart home. And that's why we've created this video, to kind of give you a helping hand. Now, obviously, I'm going to connect them up to Homey so that we can also do things like, well, controlling our lights when motion is sensed. You can have your thermostat turn on, have music play, have your curtains open up. You can do a whole wide range of different things if you have Homey in your smart home and you're connecting these motion sensors to it. Now, I've got a bunch of videos on different flow ideas and how you can use motion sensors or zone activity in your smart homes. So make sure to go check out those videos. I'll have a link up in the top right and down in the description below. Now, before you go clicking on those links, stay tuned because we're going to dive into each of these products in detail. Now, I'm going to show you in a quick overlay what these products are, how much they cost, and what networks they work on. And we're going to build up on that overlay as we discuss their advantages, disadvantages, and basically we're going to go through and talk about each one and see which one might fit best for you. So, starting from the left, I've got Ikea's motion sensor, and this will run you about 13 euros, and it runs on Zigbee. Next up, we have the Aqara motion sensor. It'll run you between 15 and 25 euros at the time of filming. Couldn't get a concrete price, but shop around and you can find the best one. And that also runs on Zigbee. The next up is Switchbot. This will run you about 30 euros, and that runs on Bluetooth via this Switchbot hub, or it can be connected directly to Homey Pro. Next up, we got Philips Hue. The indoor variant will run you about 35 euros, and the outdoor one about 45 euros. And they both run on Zigbee. However, we do recommend that you use the Philips Hue hub to pair them up with Homey, so in that case, they're Wi-Fi or cloud-based. Next up, we have Fibaro's motion sensor. That'll run you about 55 euros and is based on Z-Wave. And last but not least, we have Aeotec's Multi-Sensor 7. This also runs on Z-Wave, and it's about 60 euros, depending on where you're shopping. So the way I'm gonna set up this video is we're gonna start with the most budget-friendly, and we're gonna head up the price range and end up with the Aeotec multi-sensor. So stay tuned, I'll add in chapters. So if you're looking for specific information on one of these, then just skip to that chapter or that timestamp and, well, you'll get that information right there. So first up, let's connect Ikea Tradfri's motion sensor up to my Homey here. So now that we've got it connected up, let's dive into the device itself. And you'll see that the motion alarm has been triggered. Obviously it's facing me, so that will be the case. You have, well, you can create your first flow and you get the notification timeline for this device. Let's head into settings to see a little bit more information. Obviously you can change the name. You can also allocate a zone for this motion sensor, and that's really important for motion sensors. So Homey uses a feature called zone activity, and I have a video on zone activity, so if you want some more information on that, go check out the link down in the description or popping out somewhere on your screen right now. Now, you can also add a status indicator. Let's see what the options are. In this case, motion alarm, any alarm, or none. And you can choose an icon for the device. Now let's head into device settings, and you'll see a little bit of information. Zigbee device information, well, that's super standard. And then you can also enable the battery alarm. So if we do that, hit the tick, settings were saved. Then we also receive the battery screen, and you'll see that the battery in this case is okay, and you can have flows trigger when the battery becomes low and notify yourself of that to replace the battery, etc. And well, that takes me on to the advantages, disadvantages. So, great advantage, price, 13 euros, and it's available at pretty much every IKEA in the world. So, some of the negatives, well, one, it's relatively large as far as motion sensors come, and it doesn't have any, well, you'll see some of these here, they have little feet on them, right? And then you can mount them and turn them and twist them in certain different directions. It makes mounting and angling them a little bit easier. The IKEA motion sensor does not have that, so you kind of have to stick it or mount it in a creative way in case you want to hide it away somewhere, but you still want the angle to be correct. Well, you guys get the gist. And then last but not least, you don't actually receive the lux information. So that lux information basically means light intensity. It's a measure of light intensity. It doesn't give that information to Homey. Now, a few of these motion sensors do give that information to Homey. Now, that is a drawback because sometimes you'd like to use lux intensity to determine certain things in flows. Now, that's all I have to say about the Ikea Tradfri motion sensor. It's a cheap motion sensor. The range is not that great. It's hard to mount, but you can connect it really easily. You can buy it at every Ikea, and well, it doesn't cost that much. All right, next up, we've got the Aqara motion sensor. Let's pair it up to Homey and then see what we get with this motion sensor. Okay, we've got the Aqara motion sensor connected up to Homey. It was really simple, actually. You don't even have to take the device apart. All you need to do is press the button on the side for 3 seconds. Well, I don't think it gets any simpler than that when you're talking about smart home devices. First off, let's take a look at the form factor. Now, the Aqara motion sensor is one of the smallest ones here. Basically, the working area is, well, this little box here. And you can place this in a lot of different places and make it relatively unseen. So it's a pretty good hidden motion sensor. It's not big and bulky, doesn't take up too much space. Let's take a look at the device itself. I'm gonna jump into it. You'll see that I get a motion alarm, which in this case has been triggered while I'm standing right in front of it, so that makes sense. And I get a luminance factor, or a lux indication. Like I said, Ikea Tradfri doesn't offer that. In this case, you get that, which is handy for those flows I was talking about, where you're determining light intensity based on lux values, etc. Now, you also get a battery status indication. And well, that's about it. Obviously, you get timeline notifications and you can create flows for the device. Now let's head into settings. So obviously you can change the name, you can set up the zone, you can change the status indicator. And in this case, you get a couple of options. Motion alarm, you can set the luminance. So if you want to see the luminance right on your device's panel, you can see that. You can see the battery status, or you can see, well, nothing at all. In this case, I always like to have, well, motion alarm set up as the indicator. So as soon as motion is sensed, I'll see that on my device's screen. Now, obviously you can choose an icon for the device, and let's head into advanced settings. Now, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. Here you can actually tweak the motion sensor a little bit more to your liking. And this is where Aqara is different from Ikea Tradfri, where there you got pretty much no options for the device, you couldn't really change anything. Here you can change quite a few things. So we can disable the motion alarm after a set amount of time. You can change the battery alarm threshold percentage. So basically, if you're creating a flow based on the battery alarm, then you can change that threshold. So if you want it at 10%, at 5%, if you're really, well, if you want to push it to the limit and you want to go to 1%, feel free. Or you can set it to a higher limit, like 50%, just to make sure that you've always got fresh batteries in the device. And you've got, obviously, manufacturer ID and product ID. So the great thing about this is you can tweak the motion sensor to your liking. And there are a couple advantages to, for instance, disabling the motion alarm after a set amount of time. So if you have an area that is often trespassed, or passed through, let's say, like a hallway, then you might want a low value for this. So you'll want to disable the motion alarm relatively quickly so that you can catch every time that there's new motion in an area. And if you have, let's say, a room where you want motion to trigger the lights for a long time, then it's worth setting this threshold a little bit higher, because what it'll do is save the battery life of the device itself, right? The less amount of times that the motion has to be triggered or detected, the longer the battery life. So the more sensitive the device, the shorter the battery life. And basically you can tweak this a little bit to fit your home, and it gives you a little bit more options. Now I should mention that the minimum delay between motion alarms is actually 90 seconds, which is quite long. So bear that in mind when you're choosing this device. Now let's get on to the advantages and disadvantages. Well, the biggest advantage is its small form factor. Obviously also the mount that it comes with, which is, well, you can swivel it and mount it in a bunch of different orientations. And it comes with double-sided sticky tape on the bottom as well, so you don't have to buy that extra to mount it or stick it against a wall. Basically it comes with everything you need. Now it was also really easy to pair up to Homey, so that's a great plus point. Some of the disadvantages. Well, build quality could be better, but I mean, for this price point, it's pretty damn good. And obviously it only offers basic functionality. So some of the disadvantages. Well, number one, it has a limited array of functions. You only have motion and luminance controls. So you can create flows based on that. And lastly, you have that 90-second minimum reset time. So that means that only every 90 seconds is basically how often this motion sensor will be able to sense new motion. And well, depending on the use for it, that can impact where you want to place this device. Next up, we've got the motion sensor from Switchbot. Now, I'm going to pair it up, and then we'll talk about the device itself. So, I've got the Switchbot motion sensor connected up to Homey via Bluetooth. Now, you'll see first off the device name is, well, not so pretty. It gives you a code which is probably brought about in the pairing method via Bluetooth. You'll want to go in and change the name of the device. So let's quickly do that and call it Switchbot motion sensor. So now I've renamed the device. Let's take a look at the device's capabilities. Now, 1, you'll see it has a motion alarm. 2, it also indicates whether it's bright or not bright. And this is a little bit different than, for instance, the Aqara motion sensor, which gives you the actual luminescence or lux value. Basically, Switchbot determines by itself whether it's bright or not. A little bit like automatic headlights in your car that turn on when it's dark enough, and they'll turn off when it's bright. Works a little bit the same way. You have less control over the actual, well, value itself. So you can't determine, the device determines for you. A little bit of a disadvantage for the Switchbot. Obviously, you get battery percentage, you can create flows over the device, and you have the notification timeline. Let's take a quick look at the settings, and you'll see that you can, well, change the name like I did. You'll be able to set a zone, which is something you'll want to do for all of the motion sensors, just to get zone activity working. You can choose a status indicator, in this case, motion alarm or battery, and you can choose an icon for the device. There are no advanced settings or tweaks that you can do to this device. Let's take a look at the flow cards for this device. So in the when section, these are triggers for your flow. You'll get this array of different choices. You can either have a flow trigger, motion alarm turns off. When the motion alarm turns off, battery becomes greater than, less than, battery level changes. And you can have light level changes. Either it becomes dim or it becomes bright. And like I mentioned, you don't have control over that level. The device will simply say, hey, it's dim in the room or it's bright in the room. Now a couple of the advantages, disadvantages. So number 1, it's 30 euros, which is, well, middle in the range when it comes to motion sensors. And the build quality of this device looks pretty good. Another great advantage is that you don't necessarily need the Switchbot hub for this device to connect up to Homey Pro. So that can be a good thing if you're just buying this one off, or you have a couple of motion sensors from Switchbot that you want to use. You can connect them up directly with Homey Pro and leave out the Switchbot hub altogether. Now, one final disadvantage is that this device doesn't come with any mounting hardware. So on the bottom here, there are some grippy feet, pretty much so that you can place it and, well, it grips a little bit better than if they weren't there, but there's no double-sided tape. I can't really stick it anywhere. So mounting this device is a little bit more difficult than the Aqara one, but double-sided tape is pretty easy to get nowadays, so you can mount it wherever you really want to. So let's move on to Philips Hue. Let's take a look at how to pair up that device. Now I've got this Hue motion sensor actually already paired up to the Philips Hue hub, so I'm gonna pair it up via the cloud-to-cloud method. It was, well, really simple to connect those up. OAuth 2 is always one of the easiest processes basically to connect a device up to Homey. Now you might be wondering, why should I be adding this device to Homey? Well, one of the great advantages to adding any device to Homey is that you can make it talk with the rest of your smart home. And that means that you can pair up this motion sensor or these motion sensors with light bulbs from, for instance, Ikea or Inner or TP-Link like the one I have here. Basically gives you a lot more flexibility. Plus you can add this motion sensor to then activate your thermostat, for instance, in a certain zone. So there's all kinds of additional, well, connections that you can create once you've connected up to Homey. And that's one of the great advantages of having Homey in your smart home. It just gives you a little bit more flexibility when, connecting all these devices together and really building that smart home. Now let's head into the device panel and have a look at what options I have here. So the motion alarm, obviously it's a motion sensor. I also have a temperature sensor. So this would be great in rooms where I maybe have zone heating. So if you're using, for instance, smart thermostat valves and you have them set up in certain rooms, you also want a temperature sensor in that room, just to be able to measure the temperature and have your heating controls react to the ambient temperature in those rooms. Let's say it goes below a certain threshold value, you can have flows that then turn on the heating. Now, often thermostat valves have built-in temperature sensors, some don't, so this is a great way to add that feature to a room, plus having a motion sensor there. You also get a lux value, so it measures the light intensity in the room. So basically, with the Philips Hue motion sensor, you get three different things. You get a motion sensor, you get a temperature sensor, and you get a luminescence sensor. Let's swipe to the right. You'll be able to see the battery percentage and be notified when battery becomes low by creating flows for that. You can create a flow for the device and you have access to the device notifications. Let's go into settings. And here you'll see I can change the name, I can alter my zone, I can choose the status indicator. Let's have a quick look at what's available. Motion alarm, temperature, luminescence, battery, and well, basically whatever you want or choose here will be shown on the device's screen. So if you want to be monitoring temperature in the zone, well, make sure to choose temperature here and that'll show up. As a matter of fact, let's do that. Now there's no advanced settings in the Homey app. However, I should mention that if you have the Philips Hue bridge, you're probably using the Philips Hue app. And in the Philips Hue app, let me quickly jump over to it. You'll have a couple of options when it comes to motion sensors. So you can set up, for instance, the daylight sensitivity. And what this does is it basically sets a luminescence value, so how bright it is in a room, for the motion sensor to be active or not active. Could be interesting, for instance, if you don't want a motion sensor to trigger all the lights in the middle of the night. That means you can set this value at a lower value and then the motion sensor won't trigger during the night. Next, you also have motion sensitivity. So you can set up the sensitivity of the motion sensor. And this can be handy, for instance, if you have pets running around and you don't want pets to turn on your motion sensors, then you can, well, slide this value, kind of find the sweet spot. They use a slider in this case, so it's a little bit difficult, but play around with it, set the sensitivity that basically, well, will trigger when a human walks past it or someone of a certain height at a certain distance from the sensor, and then, you know, kind of tweak it to then not sense a dog or a cat or whatever pet you have in the house. Now let's jump back over to the Homey app and take a quick look at some of the flows you can create. And here you'll see basically the wide selection of different things. Pretty much what you can do is have flows basically trigger as a when event, dependent on if motion is sensed, if the battery alarm turns on or off, or if the luminescence changes, or if the temperature changes. So a couple more features than the first three. Ikea, Aqara, and Switchbot all didn't have temperature sensors. So this is the first motion sensor that includes that. And that's one of the large advantages of this device. Now let's have a quick look at the outdoor motion sensor. And this has, well, the same sort of capabilities of your indoor motion sensor, except it's equipped to handle the outdoors. So it has a better IP rating, which, well, just means that it's a little bit more waterproof. So you can set it up outside. Now let's take a look at the Fibaro motion sensors. And this one is secretly one of my personal favorites. I use this one at home as well. Let's start off by connecting up to Homey. So now that we've got the Fibaro motion sensor connected up to Homey, let's dive into the device. And here you'll see 4 features. It tracks luminance, temperature, motion alarm, and also has a tamper alarm. And well, the tamper alarm is nothing more than a vibration measurement that basically says, hey, if I'm being fiddled with or moved or someone's adjusting me or trying to take me off the wall, then this tamper alarm will go off. So in most cases, you don't want to be touching a motion sensor. And if someone does, often it can be, well, someone's tampering with your smart home or they're trying to disable your motion sensors in certain zones. So you want to keep track of that. And this one does that via tamper alarm. And it'll flash all kinds of fun colors once that tamper alarm goes off. Let me show you. If I pick it up, you'll see it flashing a few colors and you'll see the tamper alarm turns on. Now, obviously you get a battery percentage indicators, you can create flows for the device, and you get a device timeline. So you can see exactly when certain things happen, like the tamper alarm being turned on a couple of seconds ago. Let's head into settings. And here you can obviously change the name, set the zone, choose a status indicator. So you can choose from a number of different status indicators. Any alarm is often good because it'll basically tell you if a motion alarm has gone off or a tamper alarm has gone off, and you can see that directly from your device screen. Now, for Fibaro, you actually get a bunch of different settings, which means that you can go in and tweak the motion sensor to your liking. And this gets a little bit technical, but it is quite interesting to dive into. For instance, you get options like sensitivity or motion sensor blind time. Or for instance, you can set the temperature color for the LED. And what that means is, well, when this device senses motion, so let me wave my hand in front of it, it will turn a certain color. And the color currently is green. And that means that the temperature is between when it's a blue LED at 18 or when it's a red LED at 28. So it's a great little visual indicator. If you're walking past the motion sensor and it flashes blue, you know the temperature in the room is colder than 18 degrees. If it flashes green, you know it's between 18 degrees and 28 degrees. And if it flashes red, it's above 28 degrees. So it's a really nice thing. For instance, I use this at the bottom of my stairs. So I'm coming downstairs, and if it flashes blue at me, and you can set the temperature thresholds to what you want, so design it for your home. But if it flashes blue to me, then I know, oh, it's kind of cold in my living room. And if it flashes green, then I know, oh, it's a nice temperature. And if it flashes red, then I know, oh, it's actually really warm downstairs. So it kind of gives you that visual indicator on a motion sensor, which is, well, a little added detail that Fibaro has done for this. Now you get a bunch of different settings here. You get, for instance, settings for the tamper alarm, for the light sensor, settings for the LED notification. So if you want to change this, you can, well, scroll through a bunch of different settings. Looking at this, with the amount of settings, it warrants its own video. But you can go in if you're, feeling a little bit tweaky, a little bit like you want to adjust some settings on your motion sensor, then Fibaro kind of gives you the power to do that. And it's one of the only ones that actually gives you all of these settings through Homey. So it's really nice. You don't need the Fibaro hub or anything like that. You go in, connect it up, and you can tweak all the settings to your liking and make it fit perfectly for your home. So let's get on to advantages and disadvantages for the Fibaro motion sensor. Now, the biggest advantage, in my opinion, is the settings. You can go in and really make this device fit your smart home and basically fit it perfectly and create it in the way that you want it, which is really nice, right? You get a lot of different details. The other thing is that you have the light indicator. I find that a quite nice advantage and kind of a little bonus to this motion sensor. Lastly, you have the tamper alarm, which is also a great feature. You know if someone's fiddling with it or has been moving it or, for instance, is making it face the other way or something like that, it'll let you know that someone's tampering with the device. So let's get on to some of the disadvantages. Well, one is the price. It's on the higher end of our price points. So it's at 55 euros and it runs on Z-Wave. Z-Wave is, well, both a positive and a negative, right? If you have a home built on a lot of Zigbee devices, then perhaps having the odd Z-Wave device is a little bit annoying since you might not have the correct mesh network set up to reach certain areas of your home. Let's say you want to set this up in the attic and you have your Homey downstairs in your living room. Well, then the range of that Z-Wave might not be enough, so you'll have to add some router devices, etc. Can be seen as a disadvantage. And last but not least is the form factor. It's a little bit to taste. If you like a round motion sensor, then you'll love this. And if you want more of a square one or a blocky one or a minimalistic design, then maybe you'll want to pick something else. Last but not least, let's move on to the Aeotec Multi-Sensor 7. And I'm going to pair this up to Homey. Okay, so I've got the Aeotec Multi-Sensor 7 connected up to Homey. And you may have spotted a USB cable here. This actually came with the packaging for the device. And that's because you can plug in the multi-sensor to basically be powered full time. You don't need to have a battery in it or two batteries in it all the time, and basically you can power it on via USB cable. And that's a little bit different from the rest here. So the rest are all battery powered, every so often you're gonna have to change the batteries when those run low or run out. And well, it's a little bit of a hassle. This one you can actually wire up. There's basically a little hole for the cable to pop in right in the top left corner. And take out the batteries, and there's a connector for this to plug into. That means you can have it always powered on. That's a handy little feature. I'm gonna put this to one side since I'm gonna use it on battery powers. Let's have a look at the device's capabilities. Now, The Aeotec multi-sensor is, well, basically does what the name suggests. It is a multi-sensor. It's not only a motion sensor. So we have a motion alarm. We also have a vibration sensor, which is comparable to the tamper alarm on the Fibaro. We have a temperature sensor, luminescence sensor, humidity sensor, and an ultraviolet sensor. So there's a bunch of different values that you can work with from the multi-sensor. And depending on your smart home and the reason you're using it, basically you can decide what you need it for. Sit over to the right, we can see the battery, indicator, you can create a flow for the device, and you get the device timeline. Now, the Aeotec multi-sensor does come with a stand, but doesn't come with any double-sided tape. Instead, it comes with 2 screws where you can basically mount this stand and screw it in and out of the device itself. In my opinion, not the best mounting hardware, but it works. And if you have double-sided tape, you can pretty much secure it with that if you prefer, rather than screw it into your wall. Let's take a quick look at some of the flow cards. I'm gonna head into the when section, and under Aeotec and multi-sensor, we'll basically see the wide array of different flow cards. And you have a bunch of different options here. Tamper alarms, motion sensors, temperature, luminescence, we have humidity, ultraviolet radiation. Basically, it's what it says. It's a multi-sensor. You can do a lot of things with this device. Let's dive into the settings of the device like I did with the other motion sensors. You can change the name, set a zone, choose a status indicator. In this case, you have a wide range of different status indicators. And you can go into advanced settings. Now, this looks a little bit complicated for me, but it's relatively similar to the Fibaro motion sensor. So you have a bunch of different settings that you can play with and tweak to your liking. Let's get into the advantages and disadvantages for this device. So some of the advantages, well, it works on Z-Wave. It's a high quality, nicely built, pretty solid feeling device. And you have a bunch of different functions with it. So you not only get a motion sensor, but also all the other things that come with it, along with the vibration sensor, so you can use that as a tamper alarm. Some of the disadvantages, it is relatively bulky, so it has a larger form factor than, for instance, the Fibaro motion sensor, and about the same surface area as the Philips Hue one, somewhere in between. Another disadvantage would be that the price is relatively high. So it is the most expensive one that we have here, but it also packs the most features into it. So give and take what you're looking for. If you really just want a motion alarm, then, you know, looking at Ikea or Aqara, well, there you get some of your best bang for your buck kind of motion sensor. If you're looking for a multi-sensor that basically you can install in a room and you have a lot of details and data in that room, then this might be the perfect choice for your smart home. Now, if you made it this far in the video, thanks for watching. And I hope that I've been able to share some detailed information with you on, well, one of these or all of these motion sensors if you've watched the whole thing. Basically, what I want to do is help you make a better decision for your smart home. So if you're looking for purely a motion sensor, then, you know, one of these 3, so Ikea, Aqara, Switchbot, well, they might perfectly suit you. They all detect motion. Some of them even detect light intensity. And that goes for, you know, as you move up the range, they all detect light intensity and you can use that in your flows. Now, you also have things like temperature. So Philips Hue also detects temperature along with Fibaro and Aeotec, right? So depending on what you're looking for and where you're setting these devices up and what kind of flows you want to create with them, well, now you know exactly which motion sensor you need for your smart home. And if you're looking for ideas, right, creating flows, or you're looking to get a little bit more hands-on with Homey, understand, for instance, complicated logic variables and how to use those in flows, well, I've got a bunch of videos on Homey's channel, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and obviously browse through the videos, view them, like them, add some comments if you have questions or concerns, or you just like to give me a big old thumbs up. It's always appreciated. And I'll see you guys in the next video.